Hello, searchers and seekers. We are still in the first book of Kings, and I wanted to review a couple of points. First, the cherubim in the temple that Solomon built. These are larger than the cherubim on the ark. They are these mix of animals, this fantastical mix of lion and eagle and perhaps other animals. So there are two of them in the temple. And the idea is that these are not worshipped as what they are, but they are the throne. They are the throne of Yahweh. And they sort of look like lions with wings. Now, there's not just one of them, so it's not the idea of Yahweh riding this in the temple so much as they seem to be on the side or on the side of the thrones. So that's what the cherubim are. They are fairly large, 10 cubits high, so they would be very big statues. Now, it's interesting that one of the archaeological discoveries that has been made recently is the Ahiram sarcophagus of the city of Bilbos. And there are carved into this sarcophagus an image of a cherub, and the king is in his throne at the side of it. So he's not riding the cherub, so to speak. They are flanking his throne. So this is a very interesting idea of what was in the temple at the time, and this has been found archaeologically in Byblos, which is north of Israel. And it gives us perhaps what is a sense of this creature. It also gives us a sense that the religion of Israel was not really totally unique from the religion of the surrounding cultures. So it's not as if God gave them designs for a radically new temple. It's more like they built a temple, like most of the peoples around them, and then they said, oh, God commanded you to build it like this. So it's sort of giving a divine stamp of approval instead of God actually writing the blueprints. Yahweh says that Jerusalem is the city where he has chosen to put his name. The importance again of the name, and that makes sense. It's, in our society, one's name is important to one's reputation. And the name will become a way of referring to Yahweh, to God, the name Hashem. In any case, Solomon has practiced many other religions, so God is, according to the text, taking away the 10 tribes. And he tells that to Jeroboam. Jeroboam will be king of the northern tribes, the king of Israel. And the son of Solomon will be the king of Judah, the one tribe in the south. But in any case, Solomon seeks out to kill Jeroboam. He flees to Egypt. He flees to see King Shishak. And scholars have identified him as Pharaoh Shoshenq, who ruled until 910 BCE. So this is probably a very historical account that there was a pharaoh by this name, and we will see this pharaoh again shortly. The northern tribes complain that Solomon created a heavy yoke for them of forced labor taxes, and his son cannot agree to change practices, so the kingdom is now divided. In chapter 12, verse 25 and following, we see Jeroboam's golden calves. Now, we saw this before in Exodus, that golden calves were built and condemned, and that was probably a retrojection, a retrocasting of this event back into the time of Moses, so it could be condemned. The idea of smelting gold out in the desert as they're fleeing Egypt is highly unlikely and unfeasible, but this makes sense, and it makes sense that they would cast so many things back into the Pentateuch, into the Torah, where Moses is, because the Torah is seen as the one place where the law and practices are defined by God. So you would cast it back into that time frame, and that is similar to what we have here with Jeroboam building these 2 calves of gold. So really 2 bulls of gold. Bulls are a symbol of strength, fertility. They're strong and powerful and dominant. And the idea probably here with the bulls, just like the cherubim, is not that the bulls are being worshipped as an image of Yahweh or God, but they are the throne of Yahweh or Elohim. So they are not being worshipped as animals, an animal god per se, but more as the throne with God residing above it. So a man of God comes and condemns Jeroboam for this. And King Jeroboam says, "Seize him," and he points at him, and all of a sudden his hand withered right in front of everyone. Another miracle story. And Jeroboam repents, and then the man is healed by the word of this man of God. In chapter 14:9 and following, we have this. "You were not like David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, doing only that which was right in my sight. But you have done evil above all those who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods, and cast images," so that would be the bulls or calves, "provoking me to anger." So Yahweh here again is prone to anger. "And have thrust me behind your back. Therefore I will bring evil upon the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free, in Israel, and will consume the house of Jeroboam, just as one burns up dung until it is all gone. Anyone who belongs to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone who dies in the open country, the birds of the air shall eat, for Yahweh has spoken." And that is the amazing condemnation of Jeroboam and his house. Another aspect of the northern tribes in Jeroboam is that they set up Asherim, or sacred poles, which were wooden objects, maybe reminiscent of a tree or some recollection of trees, because trees were often sites. If there's a very large tree, such as an oak, they would be places of worship. They are associated with the Canaanite goddess Asherah. So they are going to be condemned. "The Lord will strike Israel. Yahweh will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water. He will root up Israel out of this good land that he gave to his ancestors and scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they have made their sacred poles, provoking Yahweh to anger. He will give up Israel because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned and which he caused Israel to commit." Rehoboam is now king of Judah, the southern area. Solomon had set up these other temples to other gods, and Judah has continued to do evil. We're in chapter 14:21 and following. "For they in Judah built themselves high places, pillars, and sacred poles, or Asherim. And there were prostitutes in the land, even male prostitutes in the land." So prostitution was also considered something associated with temples. So in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Shishak of Egypt, whom we saw earlier, came up against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of Yahweh and the treasures of the king's house. He took everything. He also took all the shields of gold that Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made shields of bronze instead. And we actually have historical account. We have at least one historical account that shows that this probably did occur. Shishak is actually known as Pharaoh Shoshank, and there is a relief in Karnak in Upper Egypt that describes his conquest of some of the Canaanite cities at about this time. So Shoshank's reign ended in 910 BCE. So this fits with the time. Jerusalem is not mentioned. However, Jerusalem, as we see, has paid a ransom. Supposedly the city was not destroyed, so maybe because they paid that ransom, they just gave up everything. The city was spared. So it seems pretty close to historical validation here. We are told that there is continual warfare between the two kingdoms, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, the 10 tribes, and the tribe of Judah. So again, more warfare. It seems unending, and it will continue as we will look at biblical history. Now, there's a fourth dynasty of Israel, the northern tribes, and the king there was Omri, O-M-R-I, Omri. And we actually have external historical evidence for him in the Moabite stone. So we actually see that there is historical evidence that's related to the times. And in fact, Israel will be called the land of Omri for quite a while in Moab. Omri ruled about the year 870 BCE. So we're starting to get some historical validation from external sources for the biblical account. In chapter 17 and following, we're going to have this amazing, fantastical, wonderful, unbelievable account of the prophet Elijah. And this is very important. So he is described as Elijah, the Tishbite of Tishbeh in Gilead. And there's no sense of his lineage. His father's not mentioned, which is a little bit strange. But nevertheless, he says, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, as Yahweh, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. So this is as a result of the Baal worship and whatnot. Rain is being withheld. He is condemned to flee into the desert, and the ravens bring him food and meat in the morning and in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. So let's look at Elijah's name. El is the word for God, and Yah from Yahweh means the specific God. So El we've seen before. El is a god of the Canaanites. El is the part of the root of the word Elohim. El is the generic general name for God. Yahweh is the tribal national God of Israel. So Elijah means El, El God, Yahweh, Yah. Yahweh is my God. So Elijah means my God is Yah, my God is Yahweh. So Yahweh is my God. He stays with the widow of Zarephath, and he is able to do a miracle because she doesn't have much flour or oil, but they keep producing flour and oil miraculously. This is an amazing miracle coming up here. Elijah brings the widow's son back to life. This is 17:17. And so what he does is he stretches him out upon the child 3 times, and you'll often see this in the story. 3 times this, 3 times that. It's a literary motif, and it makes sense. Not just doing something once, but not just twice, but 3 times is sort of a nice figure. And he brings the child back to life. He cries out, "Oh Yahweh, my God, let this child's life come into him again." The Lord Yahweh listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came back into him, and he revived. So here we have a miracle of someone being brought back to life by Elijah. Ahab is now king in Israel, the northern 10 tribes, and his wife is Jezebel. And Jezebel is said to be killing off the prophets of the Lord in 18:4. Now, there is a contest that is set up by Elijah. He says, "Therefore have all Israel assemble for me at Mount Carmel with the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Jezebel was following these other gods. And again, these gods are not described as particularly evil or demonic, and in their societies they fulfilled many of the same roles that Yahweh provided in Israel and Judah. They were prayed to for rain, for fertility, for the birth of children, and in battle as well. So it's really not described in detail what are so evil about these particular gods. Although we will see a child sacrifice claimed about some of these deities at some points. Did that occur, or was that propaganda? We will look into that. So here we are in 1827. There are two sacrifices set up, and the prophets of Baal pray to Baal, but there's nothing that happens. Elijah says, cry aloud, surely he is a god. Either he is meditating, not meditating in the sense of Buddhist meditation or prayer, but just like pondering might be a better translation. Or he has wandered away. That was a theory that he may be doing bodily functions. That was a euphemism for that. Or perhaps he's on a journey, and that was partly what Baal was said maybe to have done during the dry season. That's why there's no rain. Baal's on a journey. Then they cried out loud, as was their custom. They cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out all over them, so that sort of a bloody worship service entreating Baal to consume the sacrifice, but it is not consumed. And Elijah sets up his sacrifices and he pours water on it, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. And then he prays to Yahweh. And then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offerings, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licked up the water that was in the trench. When the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Yahweh indeed is God. Yahweh indeed is God. Elijah said, seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape. And then they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon and killed them there. So Elijah ends up having these 450 prophets of Baal. He has them killed. So this is a very serious religion. Did this event happen? Did something like it happen? But nevertheless, this appears to be a society where religion is taken very seriously, and if you're on the wrong side of the religious question, you can very easily be killed. So Elijah goes out 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. He's kept alive magically. He goes to Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. He complains that all the prophets and people who are sincere followers of Yahweh have been killed. He's probably exaggerating there. And then we have this amazing story of the still small voice, this small silence, this deep silence. And to be honest, I'm not fully sure what this all means. God comes by and fire and wind and earthquake, and then in silence. The fire, wind, and earthquake are traditional ways Yahweh and other gods were seen to be present. The storm god, the god of lightning and thunder, and even an earthquake. But then also there was a sound of sheer silence. But then Elijah goes back to what he was talking about before, so it's not really fully explicated what the significance of this is. This is a theophany, a manifestation of the divine, and Elijah is there for that. So this passage about Elijah and the storm and the earthquake and then the sheer silence has been very influential in English literature. So let's take a look at it. Chapter 19, verse 11. He said, go out and stand on the mountain before Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. So some sort of supernatural wind. But Yahweh was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. So it's not saying Yahweh is in the silence either. In some ways, this saying is perhaps saying something about God's transcendence. God is beyond any of these manifestations. God's not in the fire or the earthquake or the wind. And so Elijah doesn't seem to know what to say either. He just merely repeats what he had said before. Now, he is told to go to Damascus, which is way in the north of Israel. So going from Mount Sinai way in the south to Damascus, north of Israel. Elijah is told by Yahweh, when you arrive in Damascus, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. You shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, as prophet in your place. We'll see more of that later. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill, and whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So maybe kissing an image of Baal was part of the worship as well. So this is an amazing statement that Yahweh is going to kill almost everyone in Israel except for 7,000. That probably never occurred. The population of Israel is probably much more than that, especially when you consider the biblical account of being 50,000 soldiers here and there, 50,000 fighting men. So the population is probably in the hundreds of thousands. So again, this is another genocidal aspect of the Old Testament deity. This is really not commented on that much, but this is almost similar to the story of Noah and the promise to kill and leave only 7,000. So that means tens and tens, hundreds of thousands would have been killed.